your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition.
Hello, I'm Naveen Day. Thanks for joining us for a look at what made headlines this past week. The big news this week was Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's announcement that he is resigning as Prime Minister and Liberal leader. Speaking outside of his house in Ottawa, Trudeau says he asked Governor General Mary Simon to prorogue Parliament until March 24th, and that she agreed. Trudeau says he will step down once a Liberal leadership contest takes place and a new leader is chosen.
I advised the Governor General that we need a new session of Parliament. She has granted this request, and the House will now be prorogued until March 24th. Over the holidays, I've also had a chance to reflect and have had long talks with my family about our future. Throughout the course of my career, any success I have personally achieved has been because of their support and with their encouragement. So last night over dinner, I told my kids about the decision that I'm sharing with you today. I intend to resign as party leader, as Prime Minister, after the party selects its next leader through a robust, nationwide, competitive process.
Trudeau's announcement comes 3 weeks after Chrystia Freeland resigned as Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister, leading for calls for the Prime Minister to step down. Meantime, the Liberals say they are searching for a leader who can hold their own against Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. And speaking of Poilievre, in a YouTube post following Trudeau's resignation announcement, the Conservative leader said the Liberals are trying to trick voters by swapping in another Liberal leader in an effort to, quote, rip off Canadians for another 4 years. He later added, it doesn't matter who steps up to become the next leader of the Liberal Party because they're all just like the Prime Minister. Speaking with reporters in Ottawa on Thursday, Poilievre said the Liberal MPs claimed that Trudeau did a great job, but he's resigning because he's unpopular with Canadians.
And that unpopularity threatens their power, paychecks, and pension. And so, right before an election, the Liberal MPs want to elect another Justin Trudeau who has a different face. They're all Justin Trudeau. They're all just like Justin. In the next election, I will be running against Justin Trudeau. Whether his name is Justin Trudeau, or his name is Chrystia Freeland, or Carbon Tax Carney, or Carbon Tax Clark, they will all be Justin Trudeau.
And federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh has a similar sentiment. He says it will not matter who the next Liberal leader will be, since the party has consistently let down Canadians.
They do not deserve another chance. They're more interested in themselves than the struggles of Canadians. We've got serious threats of Donald Trump and tariffs that put in question hundreds and thousands of Canadian jobs. And instead of focusing on you and protecting your jobs, they're worried about themselves. And we have another serious threat to the middle class in Canada, and that is Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives. Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives want to cut from the middle class to give to their rich CEO friends.
To explain the reason behind Trudeau's prorogation of Parliament and what's next for the Liberal Party of Canada, I sat down with Dr. Lars Hallström, a political science professor at the University of Lethbridge. So, Dr. Hallström, can you just tell us what does it mean to prorogue Parliament, and what's the difference between proroguing and just having a recess?
Certainly. So, proroguing Parliament is a mechanism to essentially end the current session of Parliament, which we know will be in effect until the end of March of this year, when the next session of Parliament will then begin anew. It means that the legislative activities of Parliament are functionally done until the end of that time. So it's not a coffee break, it's not a pause. A recess is typically more of a pause button and then you restart. In this case, essentially, we've gone beyond a pause and will restart with potentially even a new leader of the Liberal Party at the end of March.
Doesn't that mean that Canadians and governments can miss out on a lot of things then? Because there were things that may have been set in motion or some laws that may have been passed, or like some bills that were about to be passed and now they won't be? Is that what that means?
There is, in some cases, good reason to be concerned, although some of your colleagues in the press have noted that certain pieces of legislation coming from the Senate and from different backbenchers will effectively be done. They'll be killed in terms of process. But in many cases, you know, the work of the government, particularly as it pertains to, say, Albertans, is already done because a lot of the budgetary transfers have already taken place. And so those funds are now being managed and utilized by the province of Alberta itself and the other provinces. So we do have a bit of a gap from a legislative standpoint, but we also have, again, this is not the first time this has happened. It's not a new undertaking. Stephen Harper did it a few times as well. And it serves some political and strategic purposes as well.
And why was it important for the Prime Minister to prorogue Parliament? Because some Canadians are saying that he only did it in order to buy more time or have more time in power as leader and to avoid a non-confidence vote.
I think that's a fair and fairly astute assertion. Certainly a number of people have pointed that out. If you're trying to maintain the integrity of a party that's in a minority government but is still governing, of course, you want to do what's best for the party. There have been a number, as he himself pointed out, internal attacks. So he's been playing defense on both sides, right, of within the party and across the aisle. So I think it makes sense for him to try to build in a bit of a buffer, noting that, again, he can, and there's some precedent for this, stay on as Prime Minister while the leader of the Liberal Party is determined through the process that is set out by the party itself. May need to be abbreviated. We should be able to do it, or they should be able to do it in a shorter period than typically they give themselves for a leadership race. But largely, I think it is correct to say that it makes sense strategically to avoid the non-confidence vote, maintain some stability, allow things to settle down a little bit, find a viable leadership candidate, and then prepare the country for a general election before October.
So what are the next steps for the Liberal Party in choosing their new leader? And do Canadians get involved with it like we would have, like, say, like with a by-election like we recently had in Lethbridge West?
There are very detailed rules set out by the federal Liberal Party about how leadership races take place. It's quite a lengthy process. It requires a lot of signatures. There's a bunch of steps involved. And that may be a bit more than the party and the Canadian public necessarily have the appetite for. There have been suggestions from people within the party that it could be sorted out in maybe 30 days, maybe 45, doesn't need to be 90 days or longer. So we'll see what the party decides to do. There have been suggestions around maybe town halls, around finding a way to fill the vacuum and fill that void for the party. But of course, right now, we just have speculation as to who the potential candidates in that leadership race would be.
And do you have any speculation on who some of these candidates could be? I've heard the name former BC Premier Christy Clark mentioned.
She's been taking French lessons. That's been noted, so good for her. I think Madame Freeland certainly is a possibility. Carney is another that's been put out there. What the public appetite for that is, I can't say. There's always the balance of, as the Prime Minister himself pointed out, wanting to have a national race and being aware of the fact that it is for federal politics and for the Prime Minister's potentially role. So not hand-picking or being too narrow and saying, well, we really need to favor Quebec, or that, you know, we want somebody from Alberta, but actually having it speak to the country as a country.
And as they say, history always repeats itself, and this is already starting to sound a lot like what happened years ago when Kim Campbell came in to replace Brian Mulroney and served for a few months. And do you see history repeating itself here?
Well, we saw the Conservatives implode. I actually was part of a group at the U of C that did a survey in the '93 election, so I remember that implosion really, really well. Who knows how the public will respond, to be honest, moving into the next election. I think the leadership process and selection will be really important. It's not an easy role to step into. Canadians are not happy with the state of politics and policy more generally. I think there's a strong degree of dissatisfaction with the tenor, if you will, or the tone of politics, both in Ottawa and maybe in provincial politics as well. So people are looking for responses to real day problems, sometimes maybe a little bit unreasonably. There are other forces at play in our world that we have no control over. But it's going to be a very, very difficult role to move into, both from a policymaking and a leadership and agenda setting standpoint, and the fact that if you are stepping into a federal election, could be a minority government again, or we could see that swing back. And I would suggest it's quite likely that we could see a Conservative government in the House within the next 12 months.
What would it take for the new Liberal leader to save the party's reputation?
Ooh. If I had a good answer for that one, I would be very, very wealthy. I think there are a lot of bridges, to be honest. Obviously, people are concerned about affordability, housing, cost of housing, and pressures on housing related to affordability and how to support their families. Inflation, of course, is still a consideration. The political rhetoric around immigration is, I think, still rather tense. Not necessarily with full justification, but it's a very useful political space in which to try to gain some traction. So you have to be able to speak to those more almost mundane and day-to-day policy initiatives and policy questions that are really facing Canadians. The Trudeau government early on came in with a big agenda around climate change, around legalization of marijuana, around LGBTQ identity, things that really resonated at that time and that resonated with the public. And we've seen a bit of a withering away with that, especially post-COVID. So I think coming back, it's not a question of rebuilding trust, but rebuilding brand and rebuilding orientation to solutions.
And what do you see as his future after he steps down?
I have no idea. Stephen Harper, of course, has a consulting company. I'm not sure that that's something that Mr. Trudeau would want to do. His now former partner has just released a book, self-help book. So who knows? But certainly people in that position and from that family have lots of connections, and there'll be lots of opportunities.
Absolutely. Dr. Lars Hallström is a political science professor at the University of Lethbridge. Dr. Hallström, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you. Thanks for coming in.
And for Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day. Some Canadians are not happy with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's decision to prorogue Parliament until March 24th. They are taking the federal government to court over the matter. The Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms is providing lawyers to two Canadians, David McKinnon and Eris Lavranos, who are seeking a federal court declaration that Trudeau's prorogation of Parliament is unreasonable and must be set aside. To discuss this in more detail is the president of the Justice Centre, John Carpe, who joined BCN's Hal Roberts from Calgary.
John, why are your clients contending that the decision was unreasonable and incorrect?
Prorogation of Parliament means that Parliament is totally shut down for the next 11 weeks, which is a very long time for there to be no scrutiny of the Prime Minister or cabinet ministers, especially at a time like this when President-elect Donald Trump is threatening 25% tariff on Canadian goods. And now with Parliament being shut down like this, the Prime Minister and the entire cabinet are beyond scrutiny. They're not required to answer any questions. And this prorogation is being done only for the partisan political benefit of the Liberal Party of Canada, to give them a chance to get their act together on getting a new leader.
Now, will your clients actually get anywhere with this? It's not like this is the first time a Canadian federal government has prorogued Parliament. I mean, it happened when both Stephen Harper and John Chrétien were Prime Minister.
Prorogation is normal part of parliamentary democracy and parliamentary proceeding, but it should not be used for the partisan interests. It shouldn't be used for political purposes to benefit one political party. Prime Minister Trudeau has said he wants a reset. Well, he could go back in and see how MPs vote on a confidence motion and see if they vote down the government and trigger elections. This keeps the Prime Minister in power for another 11 weeks, and it wrongfully prevents a confidence vote that I think the majority of MPs in the House of Commons want to proceed with.
Thanks so much for your time today, John. That was John Carpe, president of the Justice Centre, joining us from Calgary.
And for some, Trudeau's resignation announcement was a call to celebrate. Here is a picture of a Dairy Queen in Langley, British Columbia. The owners posted on their marquee, "Trudeau resignation special, $2 burgers." And in Winnipeg, the Super 8 Hotel by Wyndham Winnipeg East offered a half-price special on rooms for January 7th only. Hotel owner Justin Schinkel said he wanted to spread a little cheer and celebrate the upcoming change with fellow Canadians by doing something fun and light in these dark political times. Shifting our focus now to Alberta, Premier Danielle Smith says she wants a federal election sooner rather than later. She says it is irresponsible and selfish for Justin Trudeau to prorogue Parliament until March 24th and stay on as Prime Minister until a replacement is found. When it comes to reflecting on Trudeau's legacy on the energy industry, Smith says he could have done so much more to help our country outside of the Trans Mountain pipeline expansion.
We could have, with federal leadership, potentially got Energy East built. Part of the reason they pulled the plug on that was that they couldn't see a way through to the finish line, even though they'd spent $1 billion. We could have already been well underway with a Northern Gateway, which would be, I think, the most significant egress from our country, exporting off the coast of British Columbia. We could have, with greater leadership, potentially had the Prime Minister make a case for Keystone XL, which would have been well on the way to getting the largest producer of heavy oil attached to the largest production or refining capacity in the Gulf Coast. And that none of that happened.
Our country's premiers will be meeting with PM Trudeau in the capital next week to discuss Canada-U.S. relations. It comes as incoming U.S. President Donald Trump has suggested that he will make good on his promise to impose a 25% tariff on Canadian imports later this month. Ontario Premier Doug Ford pitched Trump on a vision to supply the two countries with energy. Ford wants to see the province's grid expanded to allow more energy sent to the U.S. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith has also discussed increased capacity of oil production to the United States. The Premier will also be attending Trump's inauguration in less than 2 weeks. Will she be able to sit down and talk with him about those potential tariffs? Our legislative reporter and Alberta correspondent for the National Post, Tyler Dawson, weighs in.
I would be shocked if the Premier got a meeting with Donald Trump, I have to say. It would certainly make for an interesting photo op, but I is the President going to be meeting with premiers of an Alberta, of a Canadian province on his first day in office? I find that unlikely. She will, however, be on hand to glad hand with some of the governors who are present, some of the, senators and Congress people who she feels might be influential on some of the debates about tariffs and things like that. So I think we'll have to sort of wait and see what comes out of it. As far as I can tell, she's going to be the only Canadian premier at the actual inauguration. I mean, that helps because we have that trade office in Washington, and that seems to be how they sort of secured an actual invite. So I'm sure she's going to have a very full social schedule. But it'll be interesting to see who she does manage to meet with, which might be a way to gauge the degree of success that this trip has had.
Many Canadians are taking advantage of the GST holiday, which continues until the middle of February. For some business owners, however, it's been nothing but a pain. The GST holiday was anything but a holiday for many Canadians, particularly small business owners and their employees. The exemption, which only applies to certain items, has created hassle and confusion for underprepared stores and their customers. Secondhand stores and pawn shops had a particularly complicated feat to accomplish.
It was a day and a half to have one of my employees redo our whole computer program to adjust the items, and just particular items that had GST included over the next couple of months here. And so, yeah, that alone was quite a burden.
Some restaurants hoped the GST break would increase foot traffic and sales. So they were disappointed when that did not happen. Adding more insult to injury, the lower dining bills brought in lower gratuities.
Our server tips is depend of the amount of the people bill, total bill. So that's how it goes in here. With the total bill, that's the percentage of amount that the tips can get for the server.
There was also confusion over what items were tax exempt.
Video game systems, for example, they were GST exempt, paddles exempt, the games exempt, other accessories not exempt. So which accessories are not exempt? Well, we have to kind of look that up and figure it out. And it was really confusing to the customers and to us.
And there's mixed feelings regarding the political motivation behind this initiative.
As a business, we don't really have a political opinion on things, but we are fans of having the government leave us alone and let us run our business. And we're good at that. We know what we're doing and let them stay out of our hair.
Instead of freezing it 5% GST on a restaurant, why don't give it more, focus more on other things than the restaurant itself, like a housing, more of a buying more important things than eating out in the restaurant.
But it wasn't all gloom and doom for the hospitality industry. They were still busy over the holidays, and the benefits of the tax holiday could soon be realized. In an email to Bridge City News, the executive director of the Alberta Hospitality Association wrote, "The test will be to see if there is a change in consumer spending in January and February, which are typically much slower times." The GST holiday began on December the 14th and runs until February 15th. For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day. We need to take a short break, but when we return, it's all about a new year and a new you. A new year often means New Year's resolutions. It's an opportunity for a fresh start for many of us and implementing healthier habits into our lives. Heidi Echeverria spoke with a nutrition expert about healthier eating habits for 2025.
In the area of nutrition, experts say that the keto, no sugar, low carb diet is the plan for eating healthy, and that for many years it has been at the forefront of those who practice healthy diets. Added to this are the habits that also brings benefit to other areas. Chris Robinson, nutritional consultant and co-owner of Purple Carrot, explains what are the main aspects that people are looking for.
I think a lot of people are focusing on their brain health. We have a lot of people focusing on their hormone health. And so we'll see what trends come with that. And I always welcome trends that involve health, so long as we're doing them well. I mean, you can eat meat-based poorly or really well. You can eat plant-based poorly or really well. You can eat keto really well or really poorly. And so there's always healthy ways to do things. And that's where it's always nice when people come in to ask us questions, because we're always happy to help give them advice as opposed to reading something on the internet and that may or may not be true or good for you. People want to make changes for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's just that, well, I need to make a resolution, and sometimes it's because they have a specific issue going on. Oftentimes we eat poorly around the holidays, and so people are like, oh, I feel terrible after Christmas, and so I need to make a change. Anytime we're looking at our health, looking at our choices we make, and know we have things that we can do in our day-to-day life that can make us feel better, that's really cool. Lots of veggies, protein regularly throughout the day, and drink lots of water are my big do's.
The recommendation given by the nutrition expert Robinson is to start with really small changes, like adding more water and vegetables and putting less sugar, so that the diet resolution lasts through the whole year. For Bridge City News, I'm Heidi Echevarria.
One very popular New Year's resolution is hitting the gym. It is important, however, to find a habit that works for you so you can stick to working out. In this next story, I visited a fitness trainer to try out some gym equipment and melt away some love handles. Jared, what can we do? Like, how do we keep engaged and keep working out?
I mean, there's many different ways. You're going to hear a billion different strategies. The one I find the most success with that I like to employ with most of my clients is choosing habits rather than a goal. So you nailed it on the head saying lots of people, I'm going to shed the weight, get rid of the dad bod, whatever it is. We get fixated on a number and we only can see that number. So instead of choosing a number that's the ideal one, I would advise a client, let's talk about your habits instead.
And another problem people have is they show up at the gym, they're extremely motivated, but they have no direction. And so they may either overdo it or they may underdo it and not get the results. So we got some gear around here. Why don't you just give me a demonstration of what someone can do if they want to do some self-led exercise.
Right. So something that I would have you start on is maybe just an overhead press. Very simple. Okay. So we would just start with something nice and easy, like some 10-pound weights for you.
Okay, let's do this together.
Yes.
Okay, what are we doing?
So from here, I would get you to start here. Okay. We're just going to think fully extending, reaching, pushing through the roof, extending those shoulders as straight up as we can. And then we just come down, keeping tension to about that chin line. Okay. We don't need to come down to where we're resting and losing that tension. And then we're just going to go again.
All right, what is this thing?
So I know it looks big and intimidating and scary to look at from a distance, right? The nice thing about cable machines like this is if you chose to, you could do your absolute entire full workout here and not be limited at all. Okay, I would get you to grab one on each hand, and then I'm going to get you to take a step towards me, bring those weights down to your chest. It's very hard from there, right? So this is a good learning point. So now before we walk forward, we're going to get you to bring those weights down to your mid-chest line. Now you're going to take a step forward, keeping those there, okay? Then from here, I want you to step 1 foot forward. We're going to think keeping our chest nice and tall, and then we're going to open up those arms, keep a slight bend in those elbows to where we feel comfortable, and then we're going to squeeze like we're giving somebody a big old bear hug and really focus on squeezing that chest.
Oh, I can feel it in my chest.
Just nice and easy.
Yeah, up in the shoulders here too. Jared Carberry is a fitness instructor here at Gym in the North in Lethbridge. Jared, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Naveen. It was great to be here.
For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day. After the break, CEO of Economic Developments Lethbridge, Trevor Lewington, gives us his thoughts on Lethbridge's economic outlook for 2025. And if you're watching us online, that full interview is available on our YouTube channel.